You've been told this lie your entire life. Maybe not in those exact words. Maybe nobody sat you down and said it out loud. But the message was always there. In the house you grew up in the sacrifices you watched your parents make, in the way people around you measured success. More money. Better life. More peace. And here you are. Maybe you have more than you once dreamed of. Or maybe you've spent decades chasing what you never quite reached. Either way, if you're being truly honest with yourself right now, you already know the answer to the question this message is asking. Does money bring happiness? You know it doesn't. You've always known. And that is exactly what makes this so painful. Because if it doesn't bring happiness, then what were all those years for? Let me tell you something that took me a long time to understand. The problem was never money. The problem was the story we told ourselves about money. That it was the destination. That once we got there, once we had enough, the restlessness inside us would finally go quiet. But it never did it? And here is the hard truth that Seneca, a man who lived 2,000 years ago and still understood the human heart better than most, once put into words that have stayed with me ever since. He said, in his own way, that the person who has not learned to be content with little will never be content with much. Think about that for a moment. Not because it's meant to make you feel guilty for wanting more, but because it points to something that no salary, no savings account, and no retirement fund can ever give you. Peace. Not the peace that comes from security. Not the peace that comes from having your bills paid. But the deeper peace. The one that lives beneath all of that. The one that doesn't shake when the market falls, when the plan changes, when life reminds you, again, that you were never fully in control. If this reflection is already touching something in you, take a moment right now and subscribe to this channel. Leave a like. Not for me, but so this kind of message can reach someone else who might be sitting exactly where you are right now, asking the same questions, feeling the same things. You'd be helping carry this further than I ever could alone. Now, I want you to stay with me here, because this is where most people stop. They hear money doesn't bring happiness, and they either roll their eyes, because they've heard it 1,000 times, or they feel a quiet defeat, as if their whole life was spent running in the wrong direction. But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is something far more nuanced, and far more honest. Money does something. Of course it does. It removes certain kinds of suffering. It creates space. It gives you options that people without it simply don't have. Anyone who says money means nothing has never had to choose between medicine and food. So let's be honest about that. But there is a line. And most of us have crossed it without realizing it. A line where money stops solving problems and starts becoming one. Where the pursuit of more begins to cost us the very things that could have made us rich in ways no account balance can measure. Time with the people we love. Presence in the moments that won't come back. Peace in a mind that never learned to rest. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor who had more wealth and power than most humans could ever imagine, wrote something in his private journal. A journal he never intended for anyone else to read. He wrote about how so many people live their entire lives waiting to begin. Waiting for the right moment. The right amount. The right conditions. And he asked himself, quietly, honestly, what if this moment, exactly as it is already enough? What if you are already closer to what you're looking for than you think? Not because your circumstances are perfect. Not because everything has worked out the way you hoped. But because the thing you've been calling happiness, maybe it was never a place you were trying to reach. Maybe it was always a way of seeing where you already are. As you sit with this, you may be noticing that what you're feeling right now has layers. That this isn't just about money, it's about meaning. About time. About what we chose to trade, and what those choices cost us. I left something simple in the comments for those who want to go deeper into this feeling. Calmly, without hurry, in their own time. Something that can help you continue this reflection even after this video ends. Take a slow breath now. Because in the next part of this reflection, we're going to go somewhere even more honest. We're going to talk about what you really wanted when you wanted more money, and what that tells you about who you truly are. Stay with me. Here is something nobody ever says out loud. When you wanted more money, when you worked late, when you sacrificed weekends, when you said not yet to things that deserved your yes, you weren't really chasing money. You were chasing a feeling. Safety, respect, freedom, the sense that your life mattered, that you had built something real, that the people you loved would never have to suffer the way maybe you once did, or the way you feared they might. Money was just the word we used for all of that, and that changes everything, because it means the hunger was never wrong. The desire wasn't the problem. What you wanted, underneath all of it, was deeply human, completely understandable, even noble. The only mistake, if we can even call it that, was believing that one thing could carry the weight of all the others. Epictetus understood this. A man who was born a slave, who owned almost nothing, who lived in conditions that most of us would consider unbearable. And yet, by every account, he was one of the most internally free human beings who ever lived. He said something that I have turned over in my mind more times than I can count. He said that people are disturbed not by the things that happen to them, but by the opinions they hold about those things. Read that slowly. Not by what happens, but by what we believe about what happens. And when it comes to money, oh, how many opinions we carry. Opinions we inherited without choosing. Opinions that told us we were worth more when we earned more, that we were safer when we had more, that we could finally exhale when we had enough. But enough never came, did it? Because enough was never a number. It was always a feeling. And feelings don't live in bank accounts. Many people have asked me how to continue this kind of reflection in daily life, how to carry this inward work beyond a single video, into the quiet moments of an ordinary week. That's why I left a small book in the comments. One that touches this very pain we're exploring here, gently, without rushing, in the rhythm of real life. If you feel drawn to it, it will be there for you. Now let me ask you something. And I want you to really sit with it. Think of a moment in your life, not a grand moment, not a milestone, just a quiet, ordinary moment, when you felt completely at peace, completely present, completely alive inside your own life. Were you thinking about money in that moment? I didn't think so. Maybe you were with someone you love. Maybe you were somewhere beautiful. Maybe you were doing something so simple it almost embarrasses you to say it out loud. Watching the light change in the late afternoon, holding a cup of something warm, hearing a voice that made you feel less alone in the world. That was happiness. Not the idea of happiness. Not the promise of it. The real thing. Right there. In a moment that cost nothing. And here is what the Stoics would say about that, and what I believe with everything I have learned in this life. Those moments don't become more frequent when you have more money. They become more frequent when you have more attention, when you learn, and it is something that must be learned, practiced, returned to again and again, to be where you are. To let what is here be enough. Not because you've given up. Not because you've stopped caring. But because you finally understand that the life you've been waiting to begin has been happening all along. Marcus Aurelius wrote, again, for no one but himself, that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think of how many years were shadowed by a fear that never fully arrived. How many ordinary days were spent worrying about futures that looked nothing like what actually unfolded. How much of your inner life was spent somewhere other than where your body was standing. That's not weakness. That's human. That's all of us. But it is also something we can begin to change. Not by forcing ourselves to feel grateful. Not by pretending everything is fine when it isn't. But by slowly, honestly learning to ask, what is actually here, right now, in this moment? And then, is this enough to work with? Almost always, the answer is yes. Almost always, there is something here. Something real. Something that no number in an account could ever replace. If any part of this is resonating with you, if something in these words is landing somewhere deep and true, write one word in the comments. Just one word that captures what you're feeling right now as you listen. You don't need to explain it. Just let it be there. Sometimes one word says more than a paragraph ever could. And it helps this conversation grow into a community of people who are willing to be honest together. That matters more than most things. Stay with me just a little longer. Because in the final part of this reflection, I want to bring you somewhere quieter. Somewhere that doesn't ask anything of you. Somewhere that simply reminds you, in case you've forgotten, that you are not behind. That you are not too late. That the life in front of you still holds more than you can currently see. That is where we're going. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep cannot fix. You felt it. Maybe you feel it right now, in this very moment, as you listen to these words. It's not the tiredness that comes from working too hard, though that is real and it is valid. It's something older than that. Something quieter. A fatigue that lives not in the body, but somewhere deeper. In the part of you that has been carrying questions for years without anyone ever sitting down long enough to help you carry them. Was it worth it? Did I choose well? Is there still time? Those are not small questions. They are the questions of a life being lived honestly. And if you are asking them, if you are still asking them at this point in your journey, then I want you to hear something that I mean with absolute sincerity. That is not a sign of failure. That is a sign of a soul that is still awake. So many people reach a certain age and simply stop asking. Not because they found the answers, but because the asking became too uncomfortable. Because somewhere along the way they decided it was safer to go quiet on the inside, to keep moving, keep doing, keep filling the hours, than to sit still long enough to hear what was trying to be heard. And you didn't do that. You're here. You're listening. You're willing to feel what this is asking you to feel. That takes more courage than most people will ever give you credit for. Now I want to talk to you about something that I believe sits at the very center of everything we've been exploring today. Not money. Not happiness. Not even peace, though peace is where we're heading. I want to talk about meaning. Because here is the thing that the philosophers knew, the thing that Marcus Aurelius returned to again and again in those private pages, the thing Seneca tried to say in 100 different ways across 100 different letters, the thing that Epictetus embodied not through privilege but through radical, unshakable inner freedom. A life without meaning is a life no amount of money can save. And a life filled with meaning, even a simple life, even a quiet life, even a life that the world might overlook entirely, that life is rich in a way that cannot be counted. Think about the people you have loved most in your lifetime. Not the wealthiest. Not the most successful by any conventional measure. The ones who made you feel something real when you were near them. The ones whose presence was a kind of homecoming. The ones who, when they spoke, made you feel seen in a way that the rest of the world rarely managed. What did they have? Not more money. Not more power. Not more status. They had presence. They had depth. They had a quality of being that said, without words, without effort, I am here. I have lived. And I have learned something worth knowing. That is what you are being invited into right now. Not as a concept. Not as a philosophy. But as a lived reality. A daily practice. A slow, patient, tender turning of your attention toward what has always mattered most. Let me say something now that I want you to hold for a long time after this video ends. You are not too late. I know that voice inside you. The one that counts the years. The one that makes a list of everything that was supposed to happen and didn't. The one that speaks in the language of should have and if only and what might have been. I know that voice because it lives in all of us. But here is what the Stoics understood. What Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself on the nights when even an emperor felt the weight of all he had not done. That the only moment any human being has ever truly possessed is the one they are standing in right now. Not yesterday. Not 10 years ago. Not the version of your life that existed before the loss, before the disappointment, before the thing that changed everything. Now. This breath. This moment. This quiet space between what was and what can still be. And inside that space, small as it may seem, ordinary as it may feel, there is more available to you than you currently believe. I want to say something about regret, because I think it deserves to be addressed honestly and without flinching. Regret is real. It is not something to be dismissed or talked around or covered over with positive thinking. Some things in life genuinely deserved to go differently. Some choices, looking back, cost more than they should have. Some silences lasted too long. Some words were never said. Some time, real, irreplaceable, precious time, was spent on things that were not worth it. All of that is true. And none of it can be changed. But, and this is the thing I want you to hear as clearly as anything else said in this entire reflection, regret, when it is honest and when it is carried with wisdom rather than with punishment, can become one of the most clarifying forces a human being ever encounters. Because regret tells you what you valued. It does not come for the things that didn't matter. It comes for the things that mattered deeply and were missed or lost or left unfinished. And when you listen to it, not with the cruelty of self-blame, but with the compassion of someone trying to understand their own heart, it becomes a kind of compass. It says, this is what I care about. This is what is real to me. This is what I don't want to lose again. And if you are still here, if there are still days ahead of you, still mornings that will come, still people in your life who are within reach, then regret is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a more honest one. Seneca wrote, in a letter to a friend near the end of his own life, that the greatest obstacle to living is expectation. The habit of waiting. Of treating the present as a preparation for something else. Of believing that real life will begin once a certain condition is met. He said, Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything is foreign to us. Time alone is ours. Read that again. Time alone is ours. Not the money. Not the recognition. Not the outcome of all the plans we made. Not even the love of the people we wanted to keep. Because people, too, cannot be possessed, only cherished for however long they are given to us. But time, the time we are living right now, this very hour, this very breath, that belongs to us completely. And the question that Seneca was really asking, in the quiet between those words, is the same question this reflection has been building toward from the very beginning. What are you going to do with what remains? Not what are you going to earn. Not what are you going to achieve. Not what are you going to prove or accumulate or leave behind as evidence that you were here and that you mattered. What are you going to do, in the truest, deepest, most human sense of that word, with the time that is still yours? Because it is still yours. More of it than fear would have you believe. More than the voice that counts the years and makes the lists would ever admit. I want to tell you something about happiness now. Something that I think finally answers the question we began with. The question that perhaps brought you here today. Happiness is not a destination. You have heard that before, I know. It has become almost a cliché. Something people say without feeling it anymore. The way you repeat a word so many times it loses its meaning. But stay with it for just a moment longer, because beneath the familiar surface of those words there is something genuinely, quietly revolutionary. If happiness is not a destination, if it is not a place you arrive at after enough has been accumulated, enough has been proven, enough has been survived, then it is not something you can miss. You cannot be too late for it. You cannot have taken the wrong road to it. You cannot have spent so much time going the wrong direction that it is now out of reach. Because it was never ahead of you. It was always in you. Available in the smallest moments, the most unremarkable hours, the quietest days that seemed to matter least and actually mattered most. The morning you woke up without an alarm and lay still for a few extra minutes feeling the particular quality of early light in the room. The meal that was simple and warm and shared with someone whose voice you love. The unexpected moment of laughter, real laughter, the kind that surprises you, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. The feeling, however brief, of doing something that was purely yours. That came from the part of you that exists beneath the performance, beneath the striving, beneath everything you were taught you needed to be. Those moments were happiness. Not glimpses of it. Not rehearsals for it. The real thing, fully present, fully alive, waiting to be noticed. And here is perhaps the most stoic truth of all, the one that Marcus Aurelius came back to with the patience and discipline of a man who understood that certain truths have to be remembered daily because the world works very hard to make you forget them. You already have what you need to begin. Not everything you need to finish. Not everything you need to be certain. Not everything you need to feel completely ready and completely unafraid. But everything you need to begin. The capacity to notice. The capacity to choose, even in small ways, even in daily ways, where your attention goes. The capacity to be present to the life that is actually happening, rather than the one you are still waiting to start. That capacity is in you right now. It was always in you. No amount of money put it there. And no amount of money can take it away. If this message has stayed with you, if somewhere in these words you recognized something you have known for a long time but perhaps needed to hear out loud, then I want to invite you to do something gentle. Not a grand gesture. Not a dramatic change. Just sit with it. Let this reflection continue inside you long after this video ends. Let it ask its questions in the quiet hours. Let it remind you, on the days when the old habits return and the old hungers rise, that you know something now that changes things. That what you were always looking for was never out there. That it was always closer than you thought. That it is still here. Right now. In this breath. In this moment. In this life that is still, even now, entirely and beautifully yours. I left something in the comments for those who feel drawn to continue this path, a quiet companion for the days ahead, something that speaks to exactly this kind of searching and offers a gentle way to keep going. It will be there whenever you are ready. There is no hurry. Take your time leaving this place today. Don't rush back into the noise. Sit for just a moment longer than you normally would. And ask yourself, not with urgency, not with judgment, but with the soft and genuine curiosity of someone who is finally ready to listen to their own life. What if everything I truly need, I already have? Let that question breathe. Let it live in the silence between your thoughts. Because silence, in the end, is not emptiness. It is where the truest answers have always been waiting. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being the kind of person who still asks the deep questions, because the world needs more of that, not less. Until next time, take care of what is most precious. Take care of yourself.